What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah. Today, I invite you yet again to grab a snack, a beverage, and a comfy seat. Make sure your seat's comfy because this might be a lengthy one. And let me talk at you for a minute. So about a month ago, Jeremy from Black Magic Craft, phenomenal crafter of terrain, I love his channel to death, reached out to me about his game that is done with Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter, I believe he said, is supposed to be fulfilling sometime in October. Isles of Torment. Now, I had to print mine because he was kind enough to send me the STLs as well as the PDFs for the stuff that we need to play the game. So I'm excited to get this on the table. I remember seeing it when it was first getting talked about and seeing the models and just thinking, man, those things are freaking very, very, very cool. So today we're going to flip through this book and take a look at it. Starting off the way I always do with the art in the book, because as an artist, there's a lot of this type of style. This very tight pointillism, reminiscent of, it reminds me of John Blanche, the great John Blanche, has a book that he did, called maybe Wildwood or something along those lines. There's a lot of just him being crazy with this very tight pointillistic style. And there's also a fair amount of this more classical type of painting. But this stuff right here, this stuff is what I love. This is the art that I think is the best in the book. Of course, that is just my opinion, and like buttholes, everybody has one. But I love this, and I wish the whole book was nothing but this, because I know what it takes to create something like this. And it's so impressive. So the book opens, as many books do, with lore. And we're going to do kind of a quick breakdown of the universe and its origins. It starts, as all good stories do, at the beginning. So according to the lore, in the beginning, there was oblivion. There was nothing. There was just unsentient energy. And then one day, that all changed when it had a thought. And immediately, those thoughts expanded outwards to the very, very borders of the cosmic realm, where each of them stayed when they could go no further and coalesced over time into separate energies that created and maintained a balance throughout the cosmic realm. Those energies were Bellicus, who represents power, Decus, who represents desire, Ariset, who represents weakness, and Vacuous, who represents despair. And they are diametrically opposed. So Bellicus as power is diametrically opposed to Ariset as weakness in the cosmic map and their locations in the universe. So those bundles, those primordials, then beget the Eternals, whose purpose it is to spread sentience throughout the cosmic realm. And with the rise of that sentience, the primordials also gain in power because they invest some of their energy into the sentient beings that serve them at their birth, and then at death, that energy returns to them and creates a cycle of this energy ever expanding through the cosmos. However, a wrench is about to get thrown into the plan because a new race is about to arise, and it's a race of troublemakers. I'm talking about humanity. Yeah, definitely talking about people. And with the dawn of humanity, a new form of energy enters into the cosmic realm known as prime energy. You see, Earth exists at the very center of the cosmic realm, and as such functions as a ley line between all four of the primordials, where all of their powers kind of converge in one place. Now, as humanity progresses, humanity in the beginning is attuned with these primordials, these great ancient powers. But as we all know, over time, humanity has a tendency to become less and less humble and more detached from where we come. And as that happens, doubt is spawned, and as that happens, humanity begins to create a new narrative for itself. Enter the creation myths of every culture on the planet. And in doing that, kind of lock themselves and their prime energy away from the primordials, where they can no longer access it. This happens due with the creation of what are labeled here as heaven and hell, but could be any number of realms that humanity has invented throughout time. And for millennia, the realms of heaven and hell existed as a yin and yang around the earth, disconnecting the earth from the rest of the cosmic realm. Earth. Well, over time, all the prime energy developed by humans begins to release and build up, causing a collapse of the barrier between heaven and hell. Now, heaven and hell are like oil and water. They cannot occupy the same space. So when this happens, a new realm is created around the earth, which is called the Echo. And the Echo is now where all of humanity goes when they die. And in there, all of their prime energy is trapped. The primordials need that. So the Eternals, under the primordials, create idols. Because you see, the Eternals and the primordials, they cannot get into the Echo. Can't get there. However, this new being, the idols of Torment that they create, can. And there are 8 orders that kind of rotate 2 to each of the primordials. Because the orders go into the Echo to hunt the lost, which are the souls that just kind of wander. And to tap into those souls and reap the prime energy that those souls contain, to return that energy to their eternal, and then through their eternal to the primordial that they serve. So the whole game centers around collecting these souls, which are represented by models, and reaping them to fuel your primordial. Really cool concept, really, really original. I'm a big fan of this back fluff because it mixes just enough of reality into the mythos to make it feel real and plausible. I don't know about plausible, but you get my drift. So from there, we go, God bless, look at this, to this picture right here. This is where we go. Look at how amazing this is. God bless, it's beautiful. From there, we're going to get into, there's actually a lot more fluff. I'm not going to dig into all of that, but all of this right here is fluff. It's information about the primordials, more of this super tight, beautiful pointillism, about the primordials, the Eternals, about the different orders. This is the chart that kind of shows the realms. So we have each of the primordials and then the orders that serve them, and then humanity exists here within the center. And then we have the Echo, which circles around humanity. First thing, we need models. The models are mounted on 32mm bases, and while there is a large line of beautiful sculpts that you can purchase for the game, it is a miniatures agnostic game. So you are welcome to use whatever models you have laying around that fit the group. So for example, if you've been playing Reign in Hell over the past 2 years, you probably already have several teams that you could use for this game. 9 miniatures to a team, and the composition is locked. Unless a scenario tells you something specific to do something specifically different, the composition of your team is always locked at the same thing, which creates more balance, so you don't have it reduces some of the min-maxing aspect of the game, and I think will ultimately create a more balanced gameplay once we're into it. But it consists of 2 Slayers, 2 Lurkers, 2 Stalkers, 1 Corruptor, and 1 Reaper. You need objective miniatures, which represent the lost that you're trying to reap. And that could just be a token if you need it to be. If that's what you got, you could absolutely use that. Or it could be just random people models that you have that, you know, they're wandering the echo and whatever they were wearing when they died. So you could have people from throughout history to represent those. Or again, there's a plastic kit that can be bought. There's also STLs that can be purchased from my mini factory. There are Guardian miniatures, which are kind of an optional rule, which are motionless statues until they are activated, and then they are either angels or demons. There was when heaven and hell collapsed into the echo, all of the angels and demons were just kind of frozen in place as statues, and sometimes they can come to life. You need a board. The game is played on a 2 foot by 3 foot, so just slightly bigger than a kill team board. But I imagine that if a kill team board is all you have, those few inches might not make that big of a deal in the gameplay. But then again, they might. I haven't gotten that far yet. We're starting at the beginning. You need cards and tokens. The cards can be purchased. There's also charts in the back of the book to represent the cards where you can roll out. I will hopefully be able to obtain those actual physical cards at some point because I'm a big fan of that as a quality of life thing. You need initiative tokens. Now again, there are STLs or plastic kits that you can buy, and these are just chits that are numbered 1 through 20. You need markers for binding, conditions, and wounds, which again, if you're watching this, then you're probably into smaller games and you probably have a collection of tokens laying around that you could scrape up what you need to play the game. The game does use a full set of polyhedral dice, which I love. I love it anytime I get to break out like a D4 through a D20. It brings me great joy. I also love going to the game shop and buying full sets of polyhedral dice. So it gives me an excuse to do that and to go support my FL. And you need a tape measure and a gauge. It uses a 3-inch widget for a lot of things, so it's good to have that handy. And then everything is measured in inches. In the game fundamentals, we have roll-offs. There's 2 basic kinds of rolls, which is a roll-off, which is a contested roll. You both roll and compare the result, and there is always a defined attacker and defender so that you know which is which. The size of the die and the criteria for success is stated in the relevant section of resolving the roll. So what you need to roll and what dice you need to roll will be in the blurb about whatever it is that you're doing, which is good layout. I like that. Or there can be target values, which is a single player rolling against a target number. With measuring, which is always a good thing to me, you can measure anything at any time you play. We then come into measuring. There's certain situations where you might see that something has a restriction base or an application base. That usually means that it has to be spawned. The restriction base means it has to be spawned either within a certain range of something or a certain amount of something away from something. It doesn't use wholly within. If a quarter of your base is within 3 inches of the thing, then that's within. That's either too close or too far away. Then there are application based, which is where you'll have an effect. Sorry, my dog is super excited and playful today, so I'm kind of having to tug rope with him while I talk to you guys. Application based means that something happens when you are within a certain range of the model. Sometimes effects will ask you if a model is in terrain, and it's pretty basic. If they're either in it or they're not, pretty simple. And I assume that if part of the base is in the terrain, then they're in the terrain. You will have some terrain that is impassable, and that's usually if something is taller than 3 inches, it becomes impassable. Impassable terrain features limit model movements in all cases. However, sometimes models are forced to fall off them as a result of being knocked back. So you can be knocked down from these things that you would not be able to climb. Next we come to line of sight and visibility. The game uses true line of sight, so if you can see the model, you can interact or fight or attack or use your power or whatever on the model. Now, if you can't see the whole model, then it counts as obscured. Models are obscured when they are in terrain, or the model is engaged with an enemy model, or terrain piece or other model partially obscures or blocks the line of sight between the model and the attacker. And I like that it's very clear that in any bit of terrain you get cover. That's normally how I play things, because I feel like if you're in a rocky outcrop, even if you're not right behind a rock, there would be things that you could, put between you and the shooter. Now, there are no varying degrees of being obscured. You are obscured or you are not obscured. Next, we come to the engaged status, which is when you are within a 1-inch threshold of an enemy or a lost. You must be within that inch, and they must be visible within an inch. You have to be within an inch to attack. You have to be within an inch threshold to reap lost, which is the primary point of the game. There are a couple of restrictions on you while you are engaged. Number 1, an idle model that is engaged with an enemy model loses access to multiple actions. There's several things you can't do when you're engaged. And number 2, a model that is engaged with an enemy model must remain engaged or suffer a penalty if they move away, thereby breaking the engaged status. So when you disengage, you take a penalty. Next, we come into the idols. Not necessarily the orders yet, but the idols. So there's the Slayers, which are your melee combat dudes. Your Lurkers, which are your ranged attack friends. Your Stalkers, which are your maneuverers. They're made to get around the board and get to different places and do different things. There are your Corruptors, which can bind themselves to the prime energy in the Lost. When they have bound a Lost, it no longer flees from idols. Normally they would run away. When a Lost has been bound, the idols of that order can reap it much easier. So you kind of want to work between your Corruptor and your Reaper to gather the prime energy, because your Reapers are the only ones that can actually reap and collect those souls. Then you have your Totem, which can never be activated, and it can never move or take any actions. It can never be engaged, destroyed, or targeted by any attacks. It has the Beacon special ability and can therefore act as a conduit for your eternal powers. And a totem can sometimes draw the Lost toward it, as stated on certain Echo cards, which are the cards that you would draw or roll for in the back of the book. Then we immediately come to the stat blocks, which look like this. Very, very simple, straightforward stat block. I don't know if the cards have the stat blocks on the cards, but I would hope that they do. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things, which are your speed. Obviously, that's your how far you can move. Your attack, your defense, your damage dice, your corruption, and your wounds. The only one of those that I'm really going to talk about here is corruption, because the rest of them I feel are fairly self-explanatory. Corruption is how much corrupted energy is found within the form of that model, acting as both a measure for resisting damage and for their power over the Lost. The value represents the size of die the idol uses for resistance rolls when resolving combat sequences and when resolving Lost interactions. So then we come into the prep. Let's put it on the table. Let's play the game. So first, there are standard games or scenarios. And the standard game is just like, you're reaping the souls. Then you place your terrain, and you want 50% of the board covered with terrain pieces, and players should keep a few smaller pieces with a footprint of 4 inches or less off to the side for when you use your eternal power. So like some small ruins or some rock clusters or some dead tree bundles, stuff like that. Then we come into placing our Lost. So both players roll a d20, roll off. Whoever has the highest can place the first Lost. You place 1d4 plus 4 Lost, and that's the maximum number that can be on the board for that game. There are some restrictions, however, on how they can be placed. And if you get to a point where you cannot place any of the Lost because it doesn't fit within these guidelines, then those Lost models are just not used. So a Lost model cannot be placed within 9 inches of the edge. It cannot be placed within 3 inches of another Lost model. And it cannot be placed on fully impassable terrain. So you can't put it somewhere that nobody's going to be able to get to. Next, we roll another we have another d20 roll off to place our totems. And just like the Lost, the totems have some guidelines on where they can be placed. You cannot place your totem within 6 inches of a Lost model. You cannot place your totem within 12 inches of an enemy totem. And you cannot place your totem on a fully impassable terrain feature. We then move to the deployment for the standard mission, which is after your totems have been placed, you deploy your idols on the board following the following sequence. Number 1, each player draws 8 tokens from the bag, and you lay them down in descending order along the table edge. Number 2, the player with the highest numbered token selects one of their idol models and places it on the board, discarding the token back into the bag when they have done so. Next, step 3, Player with the next highest number then selects an idol and places it. And then number 4, you continue repeating back and forth until all the models are placed. Now, in a standard deployment game, idols can be placed anywhere they wish using these restrictions. Number 1, you cannot deploy one of your idols within 3 inches of an enemy or of a lost model. And a player cannot deploy their idols on a fully impassable terrain feature. So pretty much anywhere you want to put them on the board. It seems like it's going to make for some very, very interesting games. We then come to playing the game. We got everything set up. We're ready to get into it. So the round has an opening, which consists of 3 parts, and then the player turns, where you're going to go back and forth activating your idol models. During the opening, you reveal an echo card, which is going to tell you 3 things. Number 1, it's going to tell you about unbound lost behavior. Unbound lost are the ones that your corruptor has not succubied lanched onto yet. It'll tell you about extra tokens, which is the number of additional tokens that each player can draw while completing the draw initiative tokens step. And then 3, we have the power manifest, which is describing the modifier players must apply to their rolls when making a power manifest roll and when attempting to perform an eternal power. And those are right here. 1, 2, and 3. Once we've got the opening done, we go to our draw initiative token step. It's pretty straightforward. During the draw initiative step, you draw tokens from the bag equal to the number of models that you have on the field. Then you draw any extra tokens that you were instructed to draw by the echo card. Now, you can do this one of 2 ways. You can have one player draw all of their tokens and then the other player draw all of their tokens. Or the one that I'm more in favor of, which is I draw a token, you draw a token. Because I feel like if they draw all 8 or 9 of theirs at the same time, and then what if they get all the good numbers before I have a chance to even touch the bag? So I like better the idea of I take one, you take one, I take one, you take one, until we all have one. We then come to our lost movement. Now, the lost follow a pretty simple AI. If they are bound, they will move 3 inches toward the model to which they are bound. If they are unbound, then this is depending upon the echo card, I believe. Yes, the echo card will tell you what to do here. So if the echo is a 0 inches, the unbound lost do not move. If it's a 6, they move 6 inches away from nearby idols. If it's a 9, they move 9 away from nearby idols. And if it's a 12, if it's a T, they move 6 inches towards the closest totem. They will move in a straight line, and they will move the full distance noted if they can. They are never slowed down by being in terrain, and they must immediately end their movement if they move into base contact with impassable terrain. And for them, they have a 1-inch threshold for what is impassable, so they are not climbing over anything. Initiative system is pretty straightforward with those chits that you have in descending order. Whoever has the highest number can activate first, and during their activation, they can choose to do one of 2 things. You can either choose to activate a model, or you can choose to perform an eternal power. So if you're performing powers, you might not get to activate all of your models. But again, you're usually going to be drawing bonus tokens, so you should have some extras. Select if you choose to activate a model, then select it, and you can move and take an action. You can never activate the same model more than once, and that's pretty much straightforward. We'll get into what some of the actions are here in a few minutes. If you perform an eternal power, you may discard a second consecutive token during your turn to focus and attempt at manifesting the power, gaining a +4 modifier. And again, the powers are mentioned and gone through later in the game. The round ends when both players have used up all of their tokens or all idol models on the board have been activated, whichever happens first. Games use the standard objective. The standard objective is 2 Eternals and their idols clash over a group of lost. Each Eternal is determined to reap the lost before their opponent. So you're just trying to reap these souls. Nothing special or anything about it. You're just trying to collect the souls. Victory occurs at the end of the game. The player who has reaped the most lost declares victory. And the game ends when there are no longer any lost models on the board or because of a phase out, whichever happens first. It is possible to obtain a brutal victory, which is if your opponent loses all of their models. That's a brutal victory. Then we come to the phase out, which is a thematic way to kind of structure and end the game so that it doesn't just go forever. So at the end of the 4th round, one player rolls a d8. On a 3 or higher, the game continues. It's kind of a variable game in length mechanic. At the end of the 5th round, you roll the d8, and on a 5 or higher, it continues. And then at the 6th round, the game ends automatically. So you are not going longer than 6 rounds, which I think is a good length in a skirmish game. Because usually the first couple of rounds, you're just trying to get position and maneuvering on the board to do what you need to do. So then we come into our section about activations. So you can move and you can perform an action, but you cannot do anything. You must either move, perform an action, or do both. You can move before or after your action, but you cannot split your movement. So you can't move part of it, do a thing, and then move some more. You can also never, ever, 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 ever move through another model's base, and you can never, ever intentionally move off the board. So then we come into some more about engaging, which is kind of a repeat of what we mentioned earlier. We get a little bit more information about breaking that engage status. The enemy gets a backlash, which I'm assuming is kind of like an attack of opportunity. Engaging a lost, and mainly the engage status is required to reap a lost model. And unlike enemy models, nothing happens when idle models move away from engaged lost models, so there's no backlash from the lost. Movement in terrain is at half rate. So you get half your movement if you're moving through terrain. And when making vertical moves, idle models can never move through, up, or down impassable. There's a 3-inch threshold. Terrain features at any time. If you're using a game that has guardians in it, which are the demon or angel statues, they use the same movement rules as idols when moving in terrain, whereas your lost are never slowed down by terrain. Actions that you can do are to attack, self-explanatory, to rush, which is move 6 inches in a straight line and cannot be taken by a model while engaged. You can reap, which is when you take the soul of a lost, however, cannot be taken if you are engaged with an enemy model as well. You can disengage, and then we have some special actions. A model can only ever take a single action or special action during an activation. Our special actions are Fury, which allows a model to resolve an attack in a round where it has already been activated. When a model takes the Fury action, it immediately resolves an attack. Range, which is cannot be taken while you're engaged with an enemy model. We have Bind, which is used against the lost to make it easier to reap them. And then we have the Call, which will pull an lost model towards the idol. And then we have some free actions, which are actions or special actions that do not count as the model's action for that activation. Then there are some special abilities like Agile, Beacon, and Remain, which are on the combat cards, the stat blocks for each of the idol types. We're going to come into combat, and we're going to go into the detailed steps of combat in just a second. Before we do that, we're going to talk about Backlash and what it is and when it can happen. So Backlash is an out-of-sequence attack that one of your models can get to make. And there are 2 things that can trigger that. Another enemy breaking breaking engagement, which we've already discussed. And when resolving an attack where you are the defender, if you block their attack with a result of 5 or more than their roll, then you basically parry riposte and get to hit them off of their attack. You must target the model that provoked the backlash. And a backlash from a block does so after their opponent has completed your entire attack action. And you can never take a backlash when resolving a backlash. So a backlash can't lead to a backlash to a backlash. And a model can never take a backlash when blocking a ranged attack or an attack power. So then we go into the steps for resolving the attack. So step number 1 is select your target. Make sure it's a legal target. Step number 2, make your attack roll. The attacker will roll a d20 and add the following modifiers for your attack, which is on your stat block, and any other modifiers that you may have at the moment. The defender then makes a defense roll where they roll a d20 and add their defense modifier or any defense modifier as well as any additional modifiers, and then you compare. If the attacker's total is higher, then it is a hit. If the defender's total is equal or greater, then it's a block. And if you block it by 5 or more, then you get to do stuff. Then we go to wounding, where the attacker will make a damage roll using their whatever their damage dice is. The defender will make a resistance roll, which uses their corruption stat for idols or the protection value for guardians, and then you'll compare. If the attacker's result is higher, then the defender is wounded. If the defender's is equal to or higher than the attacker's, the defender absorbs the damage. We then remove destroyed model or reduce wounds. Models with a single wound in their stat block are removed from play. They're destroyed. Models with multiple wounds reduce their total wounds by 1. So there's no difference in dice here. It's just if you beat them, they take 1 damage. The steps in the ranged attack sequence are the exact same. A target within 9 inches. Roll the d20, add the modifiers. Roll the defense roll, add the modifiers. Compare. If attacker wins, yes. Equal or higher on the defender, no. Damage roll is the same. The defense roll. Being obscured grants you a +2 modifier for the defense roll against ranged attacks. That is important and worth mentioning. But then we go through the same steps: damage roll, resistance roll, compare, remove the model, or remove a wound from the model. There is an advantage system in the game, which says that if player models outnumber enemy models, they have combat advantage, and it gives you a +2 modifier to your attack rolls. There are also critical hits. So when resolving that, a natural 20 is a critical hit. It automatically hits. The damage roll, the attacker can roll 2 dice of the correct type and use the highest result of those 2 rolls. So pretty solid. I like those mechanics. Not overpowered, but they seem strong enough to make it really exciting when you roll that nat 20, which is, as we know, is an amazing feeling. Come to lost interactions, and the main one here are binding, calling, and reaping, I believe. Yep. So with binding, your corruptors are the only ones that have innate access to that, and it is select a target within 9. Make the binding roll, which is a test roll against whatever the value of the lost is, and then compare. If your rolls a die and rolls a die equal to their corruption value on the binding model's stat block. Controlling player adds any other relevant modifiers. Compare the total to the target value required for the state of that lost model. Consulting the binding difficulties and outcomes table for the appropriate target value. And then register your outcome. The binding difficulties and outcomes is on the next page. For an unbound model, it is a 4+, and for an enemy bound loss, it is 6+. Calling a model, you select a target within 9, and then the bound loss will immediately move 3 inches toward the calling model. When moving a bound loss as a result of a calling, it must move in a straight line. It is never slowed by terrain, and it must immediately end its move if it moves into base contact with impassable terrain features or the bases of any other models. We then come to reaping, which is the actual collection of the soul. Player bound lost is easier to reap, while an enemy bound lost cannot be reaped at all. Reaping uses the target value method for dice rolling. So you have a target number, and your target number for an unbound lost is a 5-up. For a bound lost is a 4-up. Your steps are to select your target, roll your corruption dice, compare that to the target value, modify your outcome, and if you reap it, you can remove your models. And you remove the target lost model and the reaping model from the board. Both models are now removed from play, and the idol has successfully taken that energy back to the cosmic realm. There is also a condition called rebuff, which is that if a reaping model rolls a natural 1, all idols models engaged with the target lost model are knocked back. We come into our special rules section, which is going to cover things like conditions and knockback and stuff like that. You are affected by that condition for an entire round. At the start of each new round, all condition markers should be removed to indicate there are no longer any conditions applied to the models. Conditions do not affect guardians or any models already activated. You could be held, which is you can't move during your activation, and you cannot take rush or disengage actions. You can be stunned, which means you cannot reap, range, bind, or call. If you get knocked back, you must move 3 inches directly away from the model or terrain piece that applied the effect. If you're knocked out of engaged status, it does not break engaged status and therefore provokes no backlashes. A knockback move is not slowed down by being in terrain. It ends immediately if it comes into base contact with other models, and if the knockback would result in you going off the board, you just stop at the edge. Passable terrain and the knockback ability operate uniquely. They have their own set of things. So if you're knocked back into a rising impassable feature, you just stop. However, if you're knocked off a descending impassable feature, so from the top of it, then you fall in your place at the bottom and you become stunned. We then come into our section of order abilities and special things, and this has an overall ability that all of your models get, and then a special ability for your Slayer, Lurker, and Stalker. I'm not going to go into all of these and what they do, but there's just enough there to make each of the orders feel unique and give it some different options for the way you would play them and approach the board. I plan on starting out the game at least playing the Strife. My buddy Michael, who's going to be playing the game with me, is going to be playing the Hollow. And then over time, I will be, printing and adding more to it. But that's where we're going to start. We then begin to talk about our eternal powers, the things that we, as the Eternal who controls these idols, can do to affect the board. So to deliver the power, it's delivered through a model that has beacon. By default, your totems, your reapers, your corruptors have beacon. You could also have other models that gain beacon because of their order abilities. We then have the power details, which are eternal power cards. These are here. I think these are also available as a printed set, which I also hope to obtain. In the steps of doing that, we choose the power, we manifest the power, we resolve the power. Choosing the power is pretty basic. You pick the thing you want to do. To manifest the power, you roll the target value method for dice rolling. The power manifest roll is you roll a d12 and add the power manifest modifier on the current echo card. If the total result is equal to or greater than the target value for the chosen power, the power is manifested. If it is less than the target value for the chosen power, it is not manifested. You can focus your manifest, as we mentioned earlier, by spending a consecutive token. So like if you used token number 12 to activate the power, you could spend the next one you have down in order is 10. You could spend both of those together, and you can give yourself a +4 modifier to that roll. We resolve the power by doing whatever the power says. And if it's an attacking power, if it's an effect power, you just apply the effect. And then if it's an attack power, you go through a set of steps, which start with selecting your target, making the attack roll with a +5 attack modifier. They make a defense roll with their stat block, +2 for being obscured, and any other relevant modifiers. You then compare, and if it's higher, you proceed to the wounding step, which is damage roll, which is the noted on the Eternal Power card. The resistance roll, which they roll their corruption value or protection value for guardians on their stat block plus modifiers. Compare. If the attacker is higher, then you do the thing that the spell says, the damage, which is usually, I think, going to be 1. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, so 12 different Eternal Powers, which is dope. And throughout the book, I haven't mentioned this yet, but throughout the book, there's kind of this running short story by, I think David Annandale, it said the name was. And I like this reminds me of the Carnivale rulebook, where there's kind of this continuous narrative that you go through. You read a piece of the narrative and then you go through some rules, and there's another piece of the same story that continues. And I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a fun way to add story into the rulebook reading experience instead of it just being page after page after page of rules. Give me a little imagination break in there. I like that. We then come into our section for different types of scenarios. There are quick scenarios, official scenarios, custom scenarios, and each of these will pretty much tell you what you need to do for it that's special or different. in that scenario. This is where you're going to have things like the Guardian statues coming into play, as well as your heroic lost, which are lost who have gathered enough of their memory to be potentially dangerous to the idols that are trying to hunt them. In that, there could also be things like portals, hostile terrain, modified rosters where you're not necessarily using that same loadout. But again, all of that stuff is going to be listed in the scenarios. And the scenarios are accompanied by more of that beautiful tight black and gray pointillism, which I love so dearly. We got 8 different scenarios. They're you know, kind of narrative missions. I will eventually get to these. These have some of them like specific terrain requirements that you need for them, or Guardian models or Heroic Lost models. Heroic Lost models I've got covered. I'm probably just going to use my Night Haunts that I have painted. They're ghosts with weapons. It fits. I can get away with that. I will, however, be printing the actual regular Lost models, but it's a pretty healthy chunk of the book dedicated to those scenarios, and that's good because I like that we have our kind of quick play, and then we've got our things that we can build towards and work on creating actual terrain for. And I like that because I like it when, you know, if you've seen any of the other content I try to make nice boards. I try to make my boards look nice and presentable when I play on camera. So that's exciting for me. We then come into one of the things that I think every rulebook worth its salt should have, which is a quick reference. And this one seems pretty, it gives you a quick reference for all your basic terms and critical hits, things like that. And then we've got more terms and rules. We've got tables, which gives you your target numbers for doing the different things, all your different actions, and whether or not you can do them with an engaged model. It's a well laid out quick reference. And then we have the Echo Deck Simulator, which breaks down how to roll for your different Echo cards. Now, obviously, it is better, in my opinion, to have the actual cards, but this is probably where I'll be starting because I do not currently have those, and I don't know that I can buy them at the moment. Because I don't want to have to print them and then sleeve them myself. I want to just, here's some money, give me the things. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of the book. And there is a long... This is something else here right here. And this has absolutely nothing to do with the game itself. I mean, it does, but not as far as you play in the game. 8 pages, 3 columns each page of thank yous. Of him saying thank you to the people that helped make this possible. And that is freaking classy, Jeremy. That is a class move. Love it. You're a gentleman and a scholar, sir. And then we have a page at the very, very back, the very last page, that might be one of my favorite pages in the book. And it has what appear to be like kind of little concept art sketches of the different orders. And it's just a neat, cute kind of way to close out the book. I'm a fan. So let's talk turkey. So the PDF of the rulebook clocks in at $20. So at the very minimum to play the game, you need $20. Which, for a rulebook that is as well put together with this, with the quality of the art, the layout, the ease of access and quality of life aspects of it, $20 is a more than fair price. Now there is printing cost if you want a hardback once you have that PDF, but that's up to you. I don't like playing games from PDFs. I like having a book in front of me, so that's what I just have to deal with. I have to kind of soak that cost. You can get all of the orders, every last one of them. Let me double check. Let me scroll up. Here we go. 72 miniatures, $65 will get you all 72 miniatures. That's all the orders. Then there's another one that is $20 that has the lost models, the widget for threshold, and the initiative counters. Now, the book is the only, because it's agnostic, the book is the only thing you have to have. You can also buy just the individual orders, like if you just want 1 or 2 that you like, or that's what you can get at the time. Those are $15 a pop. This is through My Mini Factory. Now, I assume that at some point after release, it will become possible to purchase plastic kits for some of these things, but I'm not sure where you would go to do that. I'm sure that in time, Jeremy will make that information available to everybody, and we can go from there. But initial read through, the aesthetic of the game is cool. The art in the book is amazing. The rules are straightforward, and there's not a lot of deviation. There's not really anything that breaks the game. I'm a big fan of the set compositions of the teams because I feel like it's going to lead to a much more balanced and enjoyable gameplay. I like that deployment can kind of be all over the place, not necessarily set zones. I like the apparent replayability of the basic scenario, and I like the number of story and unique scenarios that are involved. And of course, the setting, that kind of gothic angels and demons clash and collide in this grayed out realm of purgatorium. I love it. I'm really excited to dig into it, and I'm really grateful that you hung out today and let me talk at you about it for a while. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day. And as always, I'd like to say a big, huge, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our patrons who support us and pledge to us over on Patreon. You guys are the absolute best. If you enjoyed the content you saw here today and that's something that you would like to consider doing to help out the channel, go over there, check out the link in the description, check out the Patreon. There's a lot of cool stuff over there, including access to our Discord server, talk to me, hang out with me, talk about our work, what we got going on in the hobby, some shout outs, all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. And regardless of whether or not you do that, I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful that you decided to stop by and spend part of your day with me today, rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, may the dice be ever in your favor.